This conference will now be recorded.
All right, friends, so this morning we're going to talk about some general recommendations to protect employees and customers. First, I want to offer a disclaimer. The majority of the recommendations that you're going to see from this webinar come directly from the Alabama Small Business Commission Emergency Task Force. That's the task force that Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth headed up and presented on a couple of weeks ago. It seems to be some pretty sound advice and was derived from a wide array of surveys and recommendations. I do want to mention, if you are logging in, if you wouldn't mind muting your phone. I'm hearing just a little bit of feedback. If I can find you, I may mute you. I know Will's on here. He may kind of help us watch for that as well. Give me just 1 second. I think that caught just about everybody. I also want to give a major shout out to the Chamber of West Alabama and West Alabama Works. They've put out a really wonderful comprehensive document that we'll be sending out later today to our members that gives a great deal of advice and recommendations on how to proceed as we begin reopening, down to some very detailed information by sector and by industry. So a lot of the information you're going to see within here is also pulled from that. We do want to mention that not everything in here is going to be applicable to all businesses or workplaces. This webinar does not address public health and safety recommendations and requirements that if you've got specific questions, you do need to reach out to the public health department. And you can always evaluate your specific workspace and your specific situation with your own legal counsel and legal advisors. So let's start out with personal protective equipment. It is a great idea that depending on the volume of people that you have within your office or your workspace or your retail establishment, if you're able to wear protective equipment, it's always a great idea. We know we have several members in the area that are selling reusable cloth masks. We just bought some for the employees at the chamber from Mr. T's. They're only $5 a mask. We bought 2 per person, so that way if we do have to meet with someone, you've got 1 mask to wear, then you can take it home, wash it. You've got another mask on standby. If you are opening for retail situations and you're able to secure some disposable masks, you may consider providing those for the public as they enter. You might also post signage that requires a customer to wear a mask before they enter in order to be able to come in and shop your retail establishment. You can also put out hand sanitizer. If you do that, you want to make sure that you've got some near your entrance, at your cash register, anywhere that someone may be using a writing utensil. And then in all other areas, you may want to assist a shopper so that their ability to touch things are limited as possible. Obviously, we're going to be addressing the retail sector and the office sector that has been primarily closed or curbside at this point. The large box establishments, they've got their practices already in order. So we're going to be talking about our smaller guys. It goes without saying, if you can practice social distancing, that's going to be your safest bet. If you, for example, we have individual offices. We don't have any co-working space here at the chamber, so we're not wearing masks. We're in our own offices. We're communicating by conference phone and email instead of going into each other's offices. As long as you keep that 6-foot distance, and you need to think about that as well as when you're using common spaces such as your lobby, your kitchen, your restroom even. There is in the public order a mandate that if you have a retail establishment where you're allowing additional people in, you can only allow 50% of the fire marshal capacity. If you're unsure of what that is, that comes out to about 8 people per 1,000 square feet. Something to think about is when possible, when you've reopened your office or you've reopened your establishment, if you have a non-essential door, leave it open. This reduces the amount of times that door knob or that door handle has to come in contact with a person. If you can create one-way traffic so that you've got a consistent flow through your office or your retail establishment, that's also going to reduce cross-contamination and contact. If you have a higher traffic count in your retail establishment, consider getting the blue painter tape. It comes back off very easily. Mark off on the floor 6-foot distances. You could put an additional table out in front of your cash register. I know I've seen at Holiday Inn, Nanda has put a table out in front of their front desk just to make sure that it ensures a 6-foot distance between your salesperson and the person shopping there. Again, putting a hand washing station or hand sanitizer. You want to make sure your hand sanitizer that you're putting out has at least 60% alcohol. If you're having a hard time finding hand sanitizer right now, I'll mention Back 40 has been producing hand sanitizer. You do have to order early. They get shipments in weekly that they're producing. But you can get a bottle, I think it's a 12-ounce bottle for about $10. You can buy up to a gallon. You can buy up to a 55-gallon drum if you need it, depending on what your volume needs are. But they're pretty high octane there, so you're able to even dilute that a little and make it go a long way. You want to make sure that you're sanitizing your high traffic areas very often. And those, you've got to think about, I think we're all pretty mindful of what we touch lately. Think about doorknobs, computer keyboards, your countertops. Yeah, there are a lot of surfaces that, light switches, electrical plugs. If you're plugging things in and out, you got to think about the things that multiple people may come in contact with. When it comes to protecting your employees, one of the best practices that we've seen in the state is a self-screening questionnaire, asking your employees, even if it's just a list of 4 or 5 questions, and it may not be a formal questionnaire that they're filling out, but just a self-screen of, have you had a fever? Have you been in contact with anyone that's known to be infected? Have you had shortness of breath? Have you had an extensive headache for more than a day or two? Asking them to identify, do you have any of the primary risk factors? Making sure that they know if they have a fever or any of those other COVID-19 symptoms that they're not allowed at work. I would hope after a month and a half of this, we're all pretty adept at not touching our eyes or nose or mouths, but especially being cognizant of that at work. And quite frankly, those face masks, while they are not 100% safe by any stretch of the imagination, it does cause a reduction. It doesn't cause an elimination of infection. It does cause a mindfulness. If you're wearing a mask, you're much less likely to touch your eyes, your nose, or your mouth because it's a constant reminder that you shouldn't. I'm not sure if we'll ever see shaking hands as a custom in our culture ever again, but we certainly shouldn't be doing that right now. Our hands should be clean, but we still shouldn't be exchanging germs. I would not recommend fist bumps, elbow bumps, hugs, anything. You can just wave at each other from your 6-foot distance. And make sure that your employees know that they're required to take reasonable steps to comply with the Alabama Department of Public Health and the CDC guidelines on sanitation, that it is their responsibility to maintain their workspace and their personal cleanliness, to make sure that they're being mindful of their own health as well as the others that they come in contact with. Make sure they're aware of their need to report any safety and health concerns to their employers. You may want to establish a specific method for that to happen so that that information gets to you as an employer expeditiously. And it wouldn't hurt to make sure that they're trained. You wouldn't want someone accidentally becoming compromised because they weren't aware of how they should clean their own hands. And as silly as that may sound, quite frankly, making sure that they understand the length of time in which you should wash your hands with soap and water. Any practices that you may have in place for exiting a room where that hygiene practice occurs. You could wash your hands very, very well in a restroom, and then the second you touch the back the doorknob exiting that bathroom that hasn't been sanitized, and the person prior to that use did not use proper hygiene, there's potential infection there. So you might want to make recommendations on steps of when you go to wash your hands that the door is propped open so that you do not come in contact with infected surfaces on your exit of the room. It is perfectly acceptable to put up signage at your entry and at all entrances to your business, and with your limitations on who you will allow to come in, and that applies to employees as well as visitors or shoppers, indicating that anyone with any type of symptom is not allowed to enter. And those can be fever, cough, shortness of breath, any other sign of sickness. I think one of the recommendations is for fevers, because our body temperatures do vary so significantly, is a fever of 100.4 or higher. There are some things to consider. And this is from a great webinar I sat in on last week, provided through the Business Council of Alabama from some legal experts and some HR experts. You can screen temperatures. You can screen temperatures of employees or visitors as they come into your building. You can also require that they be tested before they come into work. But keep in mind that that is a point in time. It not only is a point in time, that test that you take could be irrelevant within an hour later because your contact changes dramatically. So the test only indicates if that person was infected at the time that they took the test. A temperature, you could screen a temperature upon entry of a building, but there are several cases reported where there are no actual symptoms of those that are infected, including no temperatures. So there's no proof by using either of these screening techniques that an individual is healthy and safe to come to work. Again, one of the best practices you can ask is for that employee to self-screen, to be sure that they have taken measures and that they feel well, that they've not known of any direct contact with any infection. You may, as you're reopening, have employees report to you that they have some high-risk comorbidities, and as a result, they're not comfortable coming back to work. That's a situation you're going to need to have a direct conversation with that employee, and depending on what the position is, what you're able to do to accommodate their return to work, to ensure their safety. You might also have some employees that report to you that they cohabitate with a healthcare worker that is in direct contact. Again, you're going to need to make decisions specific to your business and your office situation on how you phase people back into work. You may also have individuals who are simply just anxious about returning. I do want to caution you that we are going to have later this week a webinar specifically about individuals with disabilities and ADA compliance as it relates to COVID-19 and workplace safety. There are some mental health conditions that are protected by the ADA. You want to be very careful about how you handle these. So if you have situations like this where you do need an employee to come back to work and you've got some delicate situations, we would highly encourage you to speak with an HR professional, speak with your own legal counsel, and make sure that you're compliant with current regulations relating to protected situations, protected individuals. As far as keeping your employees and customers safe, especially in the same room, there are lots of ways to limit cash handling. And again, in your signage at the entrance to your facility, you can note if you decide that you do not want to accept cash at all, you could limit customers to using credit or debit cards or tap to pay. For some industries, you might be able to use Venmo or PayPal or other forms of contactless payment. I know a lot of our local restaurants are doing a great job with their curbside delivery. When you call an order, you can actually pay over the phone. They may bring a slip out to you. We always take our own pen in the car with us so we can sign, and we've not had to touch anything that's had direct contact within the last few minutes. You can also make sure that you're sanitizing your point of sale equipment after each use. There's some other best practices that are being recommended through the Lieutenant Governor's plan, and those include situations just like this, using video conferencing, adjusting and postponing your large gatherings. That's something that, you know, as a chamber, we have a lot of large gatherings we're having to look at very carefully. We don't know how long a public order may be in place. We keep hearing rumors about the length of time that it may be before we can have large gatherings over 10 or over 25. Again, we emphasize stop handshaking and avoid touching your face. We encourage you to limit food sharing. An area that you may not think about often as quote unquote food sharing. If you've got a community coffee pot, making sure that you have some practices in place where individuals that might share that coffee pot know there's an expectation that you wash your hands every single time before you touch the coffee pot. That if you have a community refrigerator where lunches are stored, you have a practice in place where it's known you may have hand sanitizer next to those stations as well. It's all a recommendation that you limit business travel, that you be cognizant of what is an absolute must and what could potentially be handled through a Zoom meeting or a video conference meeting. You could also use booking systems to stagger your customers, asking people to make appointments with you so that you know when to expect them. You know, you may have a designated room where that is the only location where you're going to meet with clients, and that room is sanitized before and after for their safety and for the safety of your employees. You could also hold meetings in open spaces. Right now, you know, many of our parks are still closed to the public, but if you have some outdoor seating at your office, if you have the ability to meet on a front stoop, if it's a quick meeting, just anything that you can do that continues to limit access to common surfaces. It's really important too that once you have your reintegration plan and your plan of work, that you communicate it with your staff, making sure that they feel empowered, they know what the rules are, they know what's expected of them, and that they know that they're safe. It is a time of high anxiety, and everyone you know, has in some form or fashion been impacted by this, if not by the direct health concern, then certainly by the economic concern. It is important for your staff to feel like they know that great care is being taken to make sure that they are safe and secure, and that they're not being put at a high level of risk for a situation in which they wouldn't have to be. So many people have returned already, starting Thursday night at 5. A lot of facilities reopened, more coming on board this week, it is important to disinfect before folks return and to make sure that, again, the staff knows the disinfection methods that have been taken. Think about common tools, workstations, equipment, restrooms, your food service areas, phones, other electronics that more than one individual may come in contact with would need repeated disinfection. It's a good consideration to even think about replacing your HVAC air filters. Hopefully you replace them on a normal schedule already, but if you're not quite due yet, it is an additional great step. You could also open windows to create more ventilation within your facility, and put some tight controls in place on who enters and exits your site during that cleaning shutdown. It should really be limited to the few people that are performing the deep cleaning, and obviously those individuals, whether that's a cleaning crew or that's individuals on staff, be given the proper protective equipment while they're doing that cleaning. Other times where you're going to want to consider some deep cleaning of your facility, anytime you have an active employee that's identified as being COVID-19 positive, let me mention that we do have several companies within our membership, within our community, that offer significant, the actual fogger, the decontamination. I know Bart Dawson has mentioned they do it, Rainbow International, Serve Pro. There are several different options for this. If you even got a presumed case, if you've had a visitor who later becomes infected, you could contact one of these companies and see about getting them in to just make sure that no virus remains on any surface. But when you do look for a company to come do this, and the three that I mentioned, we feel very certain have followed these protocol, you want to make sure that the individuals that are employed that will be producing that activity in your place is properly trained, that they have the proper equipment and PPE, that they have local authorizations or permits to perform the services and manage any potential wastes. It's not a pleasant thing to think of, but if you had an employee that became ill at your office, and if there were any bodily fluids that needed to be removed, you want to make sure that they've got the proper methodology for removing that waste safely, and that their disinfectant chemicals are approved for this particular virus and activity. After you've reopened, I would recommend that you create a schedule, and it may be daily, it may be a couple of times a week, depending on the volume of people and the surfaces being touched, but that you clean frequently with soap and water, with household disinfectants. You can also clean with water diluted household bleach if it doesn't damage the surface. Alcohol solutions that have at least 70% alcohol, those are especially good for your electronics. Oh, I have a typo there, my apology. I want to note that according to the CDC and the ADPH guidelines, that you could launder or use soap and water for any soft surfaces. If you launder something, use the warmest washing and drying setting that you have available. It's important that you wear disposable gloves when handling laundry from a sick person. Don't shake that laundry out. Remove the gloves and dispose of those gloves, and wash your hands right away after handling. And dirty laundry from a sick person, it is totally acceptable to wash those with regular laundry, providing you wash it on those high settings, and that you disinfect any hampers that and potentially infected laundry has been in. Let's talk about masks, N95 masks specifically, and who should wear an N95 mask. You are going to see them around a lot. We still are struggling with having adequate PPE for our healthcare workers and our first responders. So first and foremost, that equipment should go to them. They're on the front lines. They are daily subjected to this. So by all means, the first and foremost supply that is available in our community should go to them. Health screeners, if you do decide you're going to take temps and you're going to put someone at the front of your facility and they're required to take these temperatures, they should certainly be provided with an N95 mask. Disinfection teams, especially following a known infection, a known contamination in your facility, should be provided with an N95 mask. And if you've got employees that have broad exposure to customers or employees where there's a great chance for coming in contact with someone that is infected, that they should also be considered for the N95s. Face shields are a next level, and they're often used in healthcare and manufacturing, and they provide probably the optimum protection. If you've got folks that work within 3 feet of another person because of their job requirements, a face shield or some other shield would be a great idea. I know in Tang Marts, the first time I heard of a sneeze guard was Jonathan Tang. He told me that they had put up sneeze guards at their cash registers in order to protect their employees. But as far as just a face shield, they're generally not needed except for in healthcare and manufacturing, but they do help in those close contact scenarios. The more effective method are those curtains or those sneeze guards, those protective barriers that can be put up and they're permanent and can be cleaned often. And who should wear gloves? Employees that are in isolation, performing disinfection of common surfaces, that are handling trash or food and are already required to use gloves for safety precautions such as food prep. You will, I know I have seen occasionally, I will see someone in a car with a mask on and you can see their hands at 10 and 2 wearing gloves. Now, the mask is fine if you want to wear it in your car. There's probably not, well, hopefully there's probably not much for option for contamination with a mask. It does help you remember not to touch your face, but if you have touched anything with gloves on, anything in a public space, and then you get into your car and you still have those gloves on and you touch your steering wheel, if you have touched an infected surface, you have now brought that contamination into your car. Gloves can really cause a false sense of security because you think it's okay to touch more things when you have gloves on. Truly, the face mask is the most important piece of PPE that you can use, and that helps you remember not to touch your face, but it also makes you cognizant that you should probably not touch any surfaces unless you absolutely have to. And then after you've touched those surfaces, you've got the ability to immediately wash your hands or use hand sanitizer. The use of gloves requires you to also know how to remove those gloves safely. And there is a common misconception on how you remove those gloves safely. There are several YouTube videos out there that show the safe procedure. It's not as simple as you think. But again, when you take those gloves off, you have a high risk of transferring any contaminant on that glove onto your bare hand. And if you think that you're safe because you've had on gloves, you're not likely to use hand sanitizer or wash your hands after. So just be mindful that gloves are not the answer quite often, except for in those situations where you're handling food, where you're handling trash, where you would generally be wearing gloves already for the type of work that you're performing. I think I got ahead of myself and covered this already. But again, you know, if you're providing gloves to your employees, make sure that they're trained in the proper way to remove those gloves. Also, make sure that there's a safe place to put the contaminated materials. You may consider, you know, again, when we were talking about eliminating traffic, by leaving doors open so that more surfaces don't have to be touched. You may have some trash cans with lids that you need to prop the lid open or leave the lid off so that you're not having to touch lids in order to dispose of contaminated PPE. Let me also mention, we're going back to your masks. The safest methodology for using those masks are, for example, if you do have to go into a high traffic area, you put the mask on using your ties or the ear strands, and as soon as you've exited and are safely in your vehicle or back to your office, that you remove that mask, touching only the ties or the ear strands, and that mask be laundered immediately if possible. If it is not possible to launder immediately, that it be placed inside a bag and held until it can be laundered. You don't want to touch the face portion of the mask at any time, not even when you're taking the mask off. Just a quick overview on what the CDC is reporting as the contamination period for surfaces. For aluminum, that includes things like soda cans, tinfoil. It can live anywhere from 2 to 8 hours. On cardboard, it can survive for 24 hours. On ceramics, such as your pottery or dishes, it can live up to 5 days. Copper, and we come back to cash handling, things like pennies and cookware, it can live up to 4 hours. On glass, it can live up to 5 days, as well as metal. On paper, it can live up to 5 days. So when you're bringing in mail, when you're bringing in shipping boxes that have been shipped to you, think about ways that you can dispose of that exterior wrapping, whether it be the paper or the cardboard or even the plastic, as quickly as possible into the most remote trash receptacle as possible. And once everything has been opened, that you wash your hands thoroughly again. On plastics, up to 2 to 3 days, and stainless steel, up to 2 to 3 days. And wood, it can survive for up to 4 days. The positive is that there's no indication that it is appearing to be spread through food and water. If you purchase fruits or vegetables, raw fruits or vegetables, it's always a good idea that you wash those fruits and vegetables with a mild detergent soap and warm water before you eat them if you're going to eat them raw. But cooked food appears to kill any trace of the virus. So if you have concerns about curbside, about dining out, those folks are already well trained. They're SafeServe certified, so they have lived in this world of cleanliness, of making sure there's no cross contamination, and they're inspected to ensure it, and they're licensed based on the ability to maintain that safety. So pickup is totally fine. A lot of folks like to bring their take-up in and transfer it out of the original container, wash their hands, and then if you've got a weakened immune system or something like that, you could always take that after you've transferred it onto your own plate, pop it in the microwave for 30 seconds, and that could help you feel a little bit safer. Also, if you've got a weakened immune system and you're concerned about fresh fruits or vegetables, for the time being, you can consider frozen fruits and vegetables. So I'm by no means any expert, just trying to give some quick tips and tricks on things that have been recommended by the state on how to make your workplace as safe as possible. We will open the floor to any questions. Jonathan did point out the Back 40 is selling, not producing. They're not manufacturing the hand sanitizer. They're repackaging, producing as in the sense of repackaging, and making it accessible to the public. Jonathan also asked, is credit and debit only legal? I would encourage you to ask an attorney about that. My understanding is that it's your store, and you're able to set the parameters that you wish as far as what kind of tender you accept. There are stores that take cash only and don't take debit and credit. So I would, again, not an expert, I would encourage you to ask your attorney. Do we have any other questions? Any other comments? Yes, Craig's saying he would like to, let's see. Yeah, we mentioned Chase Fielding, that's Bart Dawson. We will provide this webinar. It is being recorded. It'll be posted to our website, just as all of our other recorded webinars are, so that you can share. We remind you again during this time, all of our webinars are open to the public regardless of membership. We want to make sure that all businesses have all the information available, that they have the opportunity to succeed and come out on the other side of this. Emily asked how you go about getting in contact with Back 40 for business purposes. From what I understand, they're on their Facebook page. There's a link to order directly electronically through the website and pay that way as well. You can also call during business hours and they can take your order over the phone. Any other questions, folks? Well, if not, we appreciate you being here with us this morning. We do have several more webinars coming up this week. We're going to talk on Wednesday about unemployment and bringing employees back off of unemployment as it relates to those who are getting back to work and or those that are now getting paycheck protection loans, and some of the challenges and the opportunities and your rights as far as a business on how to proceed with that. We hope you all stay safe and sanitized, and please know you can reach out to us if we can help you in any way. We're here for you for one-on-one counseling. If we don't know the answer, we're going to work to the best of our ability to find it for you. We appreciate each of you, and we are going to get through this together, guys. Let's restart Etowah County. Thanks so much.